setting it up right now. We should be live. All right. So welcome to Fans in Blue, episode 9. This is India v Pakistan, edition. It's always our favorite topic to talk about in cricket. Joined today by two of my regulars, Rashid and Vedang, and then two guests from across the border. Actually, interestingly enough, one who I just got introduced to, Kalim, and probably my closest Pakistani friend and one of my closest friends in the world, Asad Jafri. And also the guy I like to remind that India is better than Pakistan these days at cricket, the most.
These days being the key. These days.
At least during our friendship. No, jokes aside. So we've got a really interesting group of topics here today. I kind of wanted to, be a bit specific in kind of the discussion rather than being a general discussion. Obviously, India-Pakistan cricket going on and bilaterally for a few years now. We all hope it comes back. But I think a great place to start, which I think a lot of Indians and a lot of Pakistanis don't really appreciate, and I didn't until I moved to New Zealand, and it's the first time I met Pakistanis in my life, right? That's the first time I started playing cricket with a couple of them, but actually even more so in the US. I've been here for many years now, and when I started playing cricket against and with Pakistanis, trying to understand their cricketing culture is very, very different. So I'd like to start with the Pakistanis in the group, and perhaps you guys can sort of take us through what the typical Pakistani kid sort of goes through and how he or she learns how to play cricket. Obviously you guys have a lot more influence with tape ball, a lot more influence with sort of swing bowling and big hitting. But I'd like maybe Asad to start and then Kalim to sort of jump in after that. Kind of walk us through what you think is different in the way you guys learn your cricket versus the way Indians learn their cricket.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So for us in Pakistan, it pretty much starts the second you can hold a bat. If I recall my own story, I think maybe since I was 3 years old and I started holding a bat in my living room. Fortunately, most of us in Pakistan live in relatively larger kind of houses or villas, if you may call. And so you have ample place even in your house. So kids often just start in their parents' room, their living room, wherever, and you can just grab onto a bat and a ball. It's usually a tennis ball, which you just start off with as a kid. And that happens. You slowly progress over onto backyard cricket or garden cricket, as we could call it. So within your house, you may have a small little garden. It's usually the size of a net, maybe or two nets together, something like that. So you play that for a couple of years, but then very soon you get onto what's probably the most important element in Pakistan across the board is gully cricket, right? Which is literally on your street. I think that is the most important piece of any kid's journey here. And gully cricket has a very standard format. You play that usually in the evenings, so it's not played in the afternoon. I'll get to night cricket in a little bit, but it's mostly played in the evenings and maybe the 2 hours around the sunset time, and so it's usually the most windy then. And what happens is it's typical that you actually put electrical tape on a ball. It's usually red color, sometimes it's white, but it's usually red. And so what that does is it makes the ball a little bit lighter, and allows the ball to travel a little bit faster, right? And oftentimes here, like the way I grew up, we had a lot more bowling heroes than batting heroes. So we used to really look up to the likes of Waseems and Wakars and Shoaibs, and everyone just wanted to ball as fast as you could. Not learning any techniques, nothing. You would just come in, run in, and just try to bowl as quick as you could. And by the way, stumps were usually at the back of a chair or a garbage can or a bunch of bricks. However, whatever you had access to. So the tape ball was the most important because it travels really fast and very quickly it starts tearing. So you often have like small tears on one side or around, and then what that creates is very early that creates swing. It's almost like a natural swing just by a ball being scruffed up, right? And so very quickly, like as a young kid bowler, you really learn to start controlling swing and how the ball is moving in the air. So I think that's key.
Asad, I want to bring up an interesting topic and ask Kalim about what his opinion is in that. I heard that there would be in Pakistan, uncles who would come, 45, 50-year-old uncles with a huge gut, and you couldn't see them playing any sport, but they'd somehow and come and just bat, like they would just bat and they would smash the ball miles. And I was told that, like, if you ask them to field, they'd say, like, hame fielding karni padegi. Like, they would take it as a huge insult. Like, just come bat, hit a few sixes and go. Is that true, Kalim? Or like, what's the story there?
No, it certainly is true. I mean, there's a difference. I don't know how it works in India, but obviously, looking at our senior law, there's a lot of respect for them, and they take advantage of that. Us kids, we will never be able to say anything to them, unfortunately, and they would just come in and they would, just to get their batting, and then stay on the side. They'll get a kid with them, and they'll come and field for them on their behalf. So they're only there and sometimes they will bowl as well, because obviously they want to be involved. Nobody enjoys fielding, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why Pakistani fielding is not at the standard. I mean, to give you an interesting story, Inzimam apparently used to do this. He was highly talented, and when he used to play in Multan, what he used to do was he used to actually have a word with his coach. If I score 100 today, please don't make me field. And that was their deal. Then he would just go and just rest, and then 12th man would be on for him. So that could be one of the reasons behind his fitness as well as fielding. So,
and Asad, I want to ask you from a perspective of, so tape ball, obviously, is it played in smaller conditions? Sort of like, is there anything which makes the bowlers have to work even harder? Like, are the sixes short? Or the boundary short? Like, what drives the bowlers to be so good? Because oftentimes in cricket or any sport, the more challenging conditions you have growing up, sometimes that drives like an interesting sort of subculture of people who are good at one particular skill, if you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I think one more important context about tape ball cricket is that it's played on narrow streets, right? So the only place a batsman can hit is straight to score runs, or he can just block it and tap it. But nobody wants to block it and tap it. And we'll get to the Afridi school of cricket in a little bit probably. But you can only really hit straight if you want to score runs, right? And so what happens then is that bowlers have two options to stop it. One is either you start bowling bouncers, and and that's why you can see a lot of Pakistanis are great at bouncers, because you really intimidate the batsman and put them on the back foot. But then the bouncers won't really typically get them out, right? They may hit them, they may like duck out or weave out or whatever. But what's it called? They would like have to then, to get them out, ball those, like basically get them bowled, really. There's no other way. So you would have to then either bowl the yokers, the in-swingers, whatever it is, you would have to bowl it full and straight.
Just to add to that, Nick.
Yep.
I've just had a show with Umar Gul.
Yep.
On Friday, and we asked him the exact same question as to how did he develop himself so well in T20 cricket once, since post about 2006, 2007. And he was the highest wicket taker in the 2007 T20 World Cup, 2009 when we won, he was our major player. And exact same thing he mentioned, that, it's all about survival in tape ball cricket growing up. You have to learn ways to survive, because you can't bowl length ball, that's like bread and butter for the batsman. So you either have to perfect your yokers or learn something to do with the ball, for example, swing, especially if you scrub one side of the tape, often the umpire or the batsman will realize when it's swinging, they'll complain to the umpire, and then they'll go ahead and change the tape. So it's all, and bounces as well, as Asad mentioned. So it's all about survival for them, and this is how they improve their skill.
So Rashid and Vedang, obviously we all grew up playing cricket in Bombay. Can you talk about how different the gully cricket is in Bombay? Obviously, you guys also being members of Bombay Gym and CCI had access to proper cricket grounds as well. But if you were to talk about sort of gully cricket, or even you see a bunch of the guys playing in Maidans, how is that different to this, and how do you think that develops a different culture in India versus in Pakistan?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of the love for cricket in both countries is pretty much the same. I think enough up until probably a few years ago, cricket was the only sport really played and followed. I think enough recently there are other sports coming into the fray, which is a good thing. But it was pretty much cricket like all the way. And I think kind of the big difference between kind of the Indian and the Pakistani kind of cricket culture is, I think kind of I always found in Pakistan that natural ability and talent was actually nurtured, and like they were braver in pushing those people into the limelight. So going back to, it's not just the Wasims and the Wakars, but even people like Akib Javed, and like people were picked up literally from gully crickets, and kind of thrown straight into the limelight. And I think kind of if I think about India, I would say kind of it's only really Dhoni who's has a different way of doing things, and kind of more recently has that been nurtured and allowed to flourish. I think if you kind of leave aside the last 10 years or so of Indian cricket, I think it was much more structured, which is both good and bad. And I think kind of the one big difference is kind of just that natural lack of coaching, just your natural ability. I think kind of we saw come through in Pakistani cricketers in abundance.
I think I would like to second what Rashid said, because I also completely agree with what he says. I think Pakistan in the 90s, I think is one of the topics also which you have mentioned in your message which you sent us. I think Pakistan is more naturally talented, but I think India is a little more structured. But the one thing which I definitely feel is that because of again, one of the questions which you've answered is that, or one of the questions which you've asked, I think because of the touring countries not coming to Pakistan, I think that has pushed them back a little bit. But naturally talented, I feel be it Shahid Afridi only, or be it as Rashid mentioned, Akib Javed. I mean, we know Wasim Akram and Waqar Younis are greats of the game even now. But this natural talent which you just find straight off the maidans, as you call it, I think those are much more in Pakistan as compared to India. I mean,
so give you a bit of a perspective on that point, Asad and Kalam. What happens in Bombay is there is a big dichotomy in cricket access. So there are, on Sundays, the Maidans are basically open for everyone to play. It's basically a free-for-all, and maybe 1,000 matches going on in the Maidan. Literally, they're like, you could not make out one match from the other. But all other days, it's organized cricket. So unless you're part of a club or a school side or a college side, or some sort of coaching academy, you don't get access to those grounds. Now, people do play sort of gully cricket. It depends where you are. Obviously, in Bombay, there's lack of space. In places like where Dhoni comes from in Jharkhand, it's like a lot more space there. So being a huge country, India's got very sort of regional differences in the access to space. But there's organized cricket, and then there's disorganized cricket. And the disorganized cricket, oftentimes, I guess to Rashid's point, a lot of the natural talent is not quite encouraged, because as soon as some of those people go to coaching, the coaches kind of mold them to what's the right way to play. So I often joke that India, especially growing up, like when I used to go and practice in the nets there, and when I was in New Zealand, come back to Bombay Gymkhana, bowl to these guys, they were like cover driving machines. Like they could hit cover drives like non-stop, but as soon as the ball moves around a little bit, or as soon as you sort of attack them a little bit with short ball, they've got no clue on how to play it. And I think that's kind of what I would like to talk about next, which is, how do you guys in Pakistan sort of view, obviously you brought the point that sometimes fast bowlers intimidate batsmen with short bowling, but why is it then that given the fact that you guys have such good fast bowlers and that culture, why do the batsmen from Pakistan still struggle when they go overseas in those conditions?
Yeah, I think so. I'm happy to take that. I think before that, we have to talk about a cultural difference. Just to close off the point, is on
Yep.
batting, which
Sure.
I don't think we got to. And so for batting, unfortunately here the Misbah ul Haqs and the Yunus Khans and other greats, even in Zamam, for example, like that brand of batting is not considered sexy and is not considered cool. The brand of Afridi, for example, or a Razak, or Said Anwar. We can argue he was super gifted, but that kind of batting where you score aggressively, you continuously trying to hit the ball and score fours and sixes and really be. Yeah. I think that is just a lot more. Just that's just sexy, cooler. Your friends appreciate you more. You get more applause. Whereas if you like nudge the ball around, take singles, doubles, uh, play the 88 strike rate, call it game, you may not even get that many chances, right? And people here like to play the quick game. So that's why I think the brand of batting that you grew up with is let's be aggressive, let's hit the ball. And so that I'm just tying that into the question that you asked, was around why we then struggle overseas and against short bowling and things like that, is because if you notice, most Pakistani batsmen over the years, to any bowling, whether it's short, whether it's attacking, whatever, they're trying to hit it. They are not generally trying to time and stroke and nudge it around. And very few Pakistani batsmen you will see ducking and weaving and like leaving balls, etc. Like it's just not something that they're familiar with, growing up. So they still try to attack it. They still try to hit those big shots and stuff. And I think that causes major issues for them, especially overseas.
Yeah, just to add to that, Nick, especially when Asad mentioned the brand of cricket, because majority of our obviously background, it comes from unorganized cricket, and that's where the tape ball cricket is. So obviously hitting is encouraged there. You can't. I mean, Asad would agree. You would play 6 to 10 overs games, and that's about it. And in that time, if you're going to play like Misbah ul Haq, then you're not considered a good batsman. And the majority of the players, that's the cricket they grew up with, that's the cricket they see. Only some of them would go on to play organized cricket. And that's why most of the following comes, Shahid Afridi, if you compare his record to, let's say, Inzamam or Javed Miadad or Yunus Khan, there's a huge difference. But
Yeah.
Afridi will have more fans. So that, mentioning that and struggling overseas, I think we have done far better now than previously. I think our teams, if you look at our team, I think we have played quite competitive overseas. Most of our cricket has been in UAE, unfortunately. So not many good players could come out. The fans couldn't see. We went back against Sri Lanka recently towards the end of last year. The crowd there was amazing. And obviously the players growing up there, having seen their crowd playing there. I mean, Yunus hasn't played Test cricket since 2009, and he's our only 10,000 plus run scorer. So with him missing that, if he was playing at home, he could have achieved far more. Our current captain Azhar Ali, he only played his first Test match in 2019, towards the end of it, just in December, and he's played around 65 to 70 Test matches. So unfortunately, that's the brand of cricket, and we have been struggling with that. But I think of lately we have done pretty well. If you compare our results to India, let's suppose, especially in England, I think since 2016 or 2010, more or less, we have done far better. We have won Test matches here. We drew the series in 2016. We drew this series in 2017, I believe. Yeah, so we have done pretty well. So I think our batsmen are up and coming, and bowlers, obviously, you give them anywhere where it's bowling friendly conditions, they are bound to do well.
So I find that kind of interesting, actually, because the point you bring up is good. More recently, I think Pakistan has done better in England, but India has done better in Australia and South Africa. And I guess that's an interesting point, because Australia and South Africa tend to have bouncier wickets with perhaps less swing in the air. And maybe part of that is that, Pakistani batsmen are sort of used to playing swing growing up, which is why they tend to do better in English conditions. But again, I think this stuff ebbs and flows. India did well in England in the early 2000s, won a series there, and struggled in South Africa during that time. So, I guess it's hard to sort of draw a particular conclusion. But I do want to sort of take this to the next, sort of topic here, which is I'd like to sort of go and understand what your thoughts are on the rivalry. Now, the rivalry from the early 90s has developed very differently. You know, in the 90s, Pakistan was like significantly dominating India for the most part. Now India tends to win a lot more, especially like all the World Cup matches. What is the vibe and the view on the India-Pakistan rivalry in Pakistan? I'll start with you, Asad, and then sort of go to Kalim after that.
Yeah, so I mean, I'd love to understand, from everyone here, Vedang and Rashid and everybody, around the budgetary element on Indian cricket, because for me, a lot of it stems down from budget, right, and resources. Because what's happened is that in the 90s, there were a lot more access. There was a lot more even grounds. I mean, for example, the ground that our great Javed Miandad played cricket in, it doesn't exist today. You know, it was, to my knowledge, it was a semi-public ground, a cricket ground, and that ground doesn't exist today. And then beyond that, and this is just one example. There's so many other grounds that have just been demolished and converted to real estate and all that. But beyond that, it's also the access to training facilities. We just haven't kept up with that. You know, for example, I play here zonal cricket, which is kind of maybe one or two levels below first-class cricket. And the kind of access to coaches that we have, I mean, this is like almost, you can say, city-wide leagues where a lot of our talent plays, and coming to organized cricket. This is what I'm talking about. We just don't have access to the kind of facilities, the equipment, the coaching talent, all of that you would expect, at least a semi-professional team to have. And I've seen one level above as well. I've seen at kind of our first-class level, the level of, let's say, ICC certified coaches that we have, training facilities. I haven't even seen a single, for example, video recorded facility in Karachi. I know Lahore has a couple, but I haven't seen that here yet. It's still like, your coach will be like, tang aage karo, ya haath aage karo. It's like, okay, how much? I don't know how much I'm doing, or how forward is my head going. Different technical elements. It's still done really old school ways, and maybe in the 90s, Pakistan and India had the same level of kind of, coaching and training and facilities available. But then after that, India, the amount of money that's come in with IPL and, sponsorships and things like that, it's kind of just skyrocketed. I mean, you have international stars coming in and coaching those teams, etc. Like, it's kind of just increased. So I think that's on the technical aspect of it. But in terms of just the personal thing, the rivalry is still very much there. Frankly, two things have, I would say, reduced it, if I may. It's a very bold statement, but I think the rivalry or the intensity for Pakistanis has been reduced for two reasons. One, India isn't coming to Pakistan. I think the players coming here or international cricket here heighten some of that. There's a lot to be said about cricket at home. Neither are we going, right? I mean, when was the last time we went, right? And there was that great test series, etc. Yeah. So I think these are two elements that are also reducing the rivalry to, quite significantly. And then there's the element of, not having the kind of stars and that we had back in the 90s, not having those role models. So there's a lot of different factors, I think, at play here.
So let me ask Kalim a question, because it brought up an interesting thought, what you said, Asad, which is, why is it that the quality of fast bowling in Pakistan is not what it used to be in the 90s, especially when you have someone like Waqar Younis, one of the greatest ever, as your bowling coach. And at times he was even the full coach, right? Why is that? I guess Mohammad Amir maybe is an exception, and he's come back and he's still a really good bowler, but probably not what he could have been if he continued to play. But him aside, still good fast bowlers, but not the great fast bowlers that we used to remember from the 90s.
I think it all goes back to, heroes. Since Shoaib Akhtar, I can't really think of anybody that has come up, to that level. Shoaib Akhtar had speed. Obviously, he could do stuff with the ball. If you look at, obviously, Mohammad Asif, he was a different case, but he was a different bowler. Again, even in subcontinent conditions, he was still class.
Phenomenal bowler, actually.
Yeah, but his speed was not there. So Pakistan obviously is fascinated with pace. Going back to, our childhood memories of tape ball cricket. That's if you're rapid, you're highly regarded. I think due to the unstructured sort of, as I think Rashid mentioned, that structure and unstructure is good and bad things. Since we have so much unstructured cricket, a lot of the cricketers, due to poverty and other reasons, fade away, and they're not looked after properly. They get injuries. We still had some quality fast bowlers in first class structure who would be averaging around 20 with the ball, and like for example the likes of Sadaf Hussain or Mir Hamza even now, they're not getting a regular run in the test team. It's somebody like I forgot. I think Asad can help me with the name. Um, 600 plus wickets from Karachi.
I can't remember which one you're talking about, but there are a few.
There are a few. So unfortunately, just looking after them. And with regards to Waqar, my point is that not all good players can make good coaches. If you look at Waqar's sort of career as a coach, I think initially he joined in 2006 as a bowling coach, and since then he has had about 5 different tenors with the PCB. So it's like, for example, us guys in our professional environment, we keep going back to the same job, 5 times. You get sacked or your contract doesn't get extended, and then you get hired again in a different role each time. So I think Waqar, obviously he may have the knowledge, it's just transferring that knowledge into the next generation. So plus I don't know what his coaching qualifications are, which I think are quite important. Obviously your experience counts, but coaching is a different role from playing. So to transfer that and how to work with each player individually, I think that's key. So we do have, like for example, we have the likes of Yasser Arafat, a worldwide name in T20 cricket. He's currently doing his level 4, and I don't know. I think Waqar is most probably a level 3 at max. So I think that's the thing that PCB needs to introduce, and before hiring their coaches. If you look at the case of Misbah coming in as a head coach, our basically in the requirement level 2 for an international cricket coach. Level 2 is something that I've done as well.
Yeah, it's pretty low.
So that's pretty low, and this was specifically created for Misbah. But then again, Misbah brings other things to the table. For example, when it comes to managing, so he doesn't necessarily have to coach. He can just sit there at the top. He can have his bowling coach and his batting coach, which is Yunus Khan now, which I think has been a massive boost, for Pakistan cricket. Somebody like him, having spent a lot of time with him, he understands the game really well. I compare him to Dravid from India most often. And he obviously speaks highly of Dravid because he has helped him in his career. And with regards to fans and obviously the rivalry, I was speaking to Umar Gul, and he said that in India, even Afridi has mentioned, previously, that in India there's more fans of Pakistan cricketers in India than in Pakistan. So I think we should encourage, these, obviously looking at the political structure, we should encourage, our bilateral series. Of course, you guys, are much more highly professional team now as compared to the 90s or the early 20s. India, if Pakistan is here, India is here in terms of professionalism. So they can obviously, when it comes to these high-end matches, especially in the World Cup and so on, they can obviously deal with it in a better way with that pressure as opposed to Pakistan. And plus, we don't get enough matches against India to build that confidence that yes, we can beat India. And the last time we played a bilateral series was in 2013, which we won coming to India in a 3-3 match ODI series. So I think if that happens more often, I think it'll be good for cricket overall. And I was speaking to Yunus in my show the other day, and he was saying that he wished that Pakistan India had an Ashes-like series. Ashes would have been nothing compared to the rivalry that we have. If it was structured in such a way, and plus obviously Pakistan would have got a chance to play more Test match cricket, and obviously our players would have flourished, especially our batsmen playing on the Pakistan and India pitches. Yunus mentioned that he would have scored, I think, 2,000 to 3,000 extra runs had he played more against India, because if you look at his record against India, he was averaging 88, and he's only played, from 2005, sort of, not too much. I think he's only played a couple of 2 to 3 series maximum.
Right. So that's an interesting point. So I guess the lack of investment in training facilities, Asad. Kalim thinks it's also lack of exposure and not much cricket being played in Pakistan. Kind of also no India-Pakistan bilateral series. Kind of that's the obvious one, right? I mean, aside from World Cups, we don't really play against each other. Maybe Champions Trophy here and there. Side note, at least your coach has a level 2. I think our coach has probably a level 0 in coaching for the Indian team. So that's probably 2 levels above Ravi Shastri. But he's a legend in his own right. He's a legend in his own right in different ways. Rashid, I'd like to go to you to get your sense on what the India-Pakistan rivalry means now. Like, let's assume that in the 90s, when we were growing up and stuff, it was massive. There was that iconic Test series in '99, which was 1-1. What does the rivalry mean to you now? And sort of how could you reignite that rivalry back to that level if you had to think about ways to do that?
I mean, I think kind of the India-Pak rivalry kind of sets into two. One is kind of, the World Cup, where I wouldn't even call it a rivalry, given kind of India's dominance over any World Cup going back years and years. But kind of on a more serious note, I think kind of it is one of those high-profile games. It is like an England-Australia. And it's less to do with the teams. It's more to do kind of, with the historic nature. And those series are high profile. It's high profile for the players. It's high profile for the fans, and and it kind of gets more people watching cricket. So I think kind of we need to find ways and means of having more of kind of the bilateral series. It's not enough to play each other in global tournaments. Whether those games happen in the UAE, for years, there was kind of lots of cricket in Sharjah. Or for that matter, kind of, we put politics aside and kind of, have the people to people interaction. And, from listening and reading a lot of the autobiographies, what the players say is actually, because, the language is so similar, the culture is so similar, on the field, actually, they get on pretty well, Of course, you'll have the normal rivalry, but on the field, it's not a problem. It's obviously kind of hyped up for different reasons. So I think the more we get playing, the better.
Vedang, if I'd ask you, one of the topics I told you guys about for today's call, it's a good segue to that topic. I think it's related. Is if we were to do an India-Pakistan Test series after the current pandemic situation plays out, and you did it in India and you made it a 5-match Test series, do you think the public would be super into it, or do you think it would sort of, after a while, just, lack of interest and, because it's Test cricket and Test cricket is not as popular amongst the masses as T20s are, do you think that it may not have the appeal?
I mean, I did ponder over your question when you had sent it on the message. So I think because as Rashid said, I mean, the players and we are talking to 2 Pakistanis out here, and I feel as if I'm talking to Indians out here. So it's not that, we have any barrier to them. I think it is more a political thing. And I feel instead of going through it the way that, the political issues between the 2 countries get thawed and then start cricket, I think we can work on it the other way around, wherein cricket is like an instrument to, thaw the political issues between the countries.
I think you may have frozen up there. We can come back to him in a second. I guess, Rashid, maybe if you could jump in there.
Yeah.
Do you think there would be interest in a 5-match India-Pakistan Test series?
Totally. I mean, it goes without saying. I think kind of, I'll be very disappointed if the grounds aren't sold out for 5 days. Anywhere we play, be it a big city or a small city, I think, it goes without saying. It's for A, the rivalry, B, cricket hasn't happened in India at that level for a while. Even if you go back to the last Test series, in Chennai with when Saqlain Mushtaq and Wasim Akram, that famous win for Pakistan in Chennai, and then I think in the part of the same series was the Kumble 10 wickets in Delhi. Fantastic series. And to be honest, a two-match series is way too short. It needs to be kind of a marquee event, not just in the India-Pakistan cricketing calendar, but in the ICC cricketing calendar.
I totally agree. Let me sort of pick up on that and make a point, which I think, Kalim, what you said, that Yunus Khan told you, his view was that there should be an India-Pakistan Ashes-like series. Whether that's 5 tests or 3 tests or whatever it is, I 100% agree with that. I think every 2 years, and it should be rotated. Maybe right now, if things aren't ideal, you play it in UAE or you play somewhere else. Play it in England. That could be another interesting place to play it as well. There's huge support for both teams, right?
It'd be like a home game.
Yeah, for both sides, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't want that because you guys will buy all the tickets.
Yeah, so obviously Asad and I were there at the India-Pakistan game of the World Cup. Yeah, I think it was about 90% Indians and 10% Pakistanis. But yeah, I mean, look, I think if you have that, it kind of almost builds the anticipation and the excitement in India-Pakistan cricket back. And I think, one of the things I did want to say is that, like, yes, the World Cup matches, are always a huge build-up, very exciting. Yes, India's won all of them, but fine. Champions Trophy, for example, Pakistan beat us in the final quite handily. But, I think there's a different element to Test cricket, which I think we're missing. And the lack of Test cricket between the two nations, I think actually is very sad. I mean, when was the last Test match? Was it 2007 between the two countries?
Yeah, it was 2007.
Right.
Yeah.
So in November 2007, if I'm not wrong, was the last Test. I mean, that's travesty. 13 years without a Test match between India and Pakistan. And having grown up watching that, there's some iconic contests. I think, what often gets overlooked is Pakistan has had some great spinners as well. The Abdul Qadirs, Saqlain, Mushtaq Ahmed, all these guys. And so you guys are probably best suited to doing well in Indian conditions, right? Similarly, the wickets in Pakistan tend to be, on the flatter side, almost like roads, and guys like Sehwag and stuff have gone there and done phenomenally well as well. So let me sort of kind of tie that up on this topic with you guys, Asad and Kalim. Sort of, how would it be viewed in Pakistan? Would there be like immense excitement? Is this something like everyone would get behind, and it could be like a carnival type atmosphere in this, every like biannual series?
I think so. I think it's going to be, as you mentioned, Test cricket, we haven't played since 2007 against India. The last time they came over to Pakistan for a Test series, I mean, there's similarly, just like India has a lot of Pakistan followers. Similarly, we have a lot of, like, for example, Virat Kohli, Dhoni, etc. There's a lot of fans out there, and who would love to watch, India play in Pakistan. So I think it's something, looking at the political structure, I think we're missing, something very huge. We should cash in on that, regardless of what the political structure is. Even if they're at war, we should still be playing cricket. So I feel, this is something we have and we're not cashing in on. The amount of money that could bring, for both nations in terms of cricket, we could lead, world cricket in terms of that. So I think there's something we're missing, and there's going to be a lot of interest, even when Pakistan has toured there, and there's 100,000 people watching, in the stadium. So there's a lot of interest there, and having spoken to the players themselves, they get along with the teams very well. Their personal friendship with the players, it's on another level. Like, for example, how we are talking right now, it's just the political structure that is holding us back, and we're missing out on something huge. Maybe in 30 years down the line, Pakistan and India would be playing such cricket, and we'd be cursing ourselves that in our
we missed out.
Yeah, that we missed out. We missed out on so much cricket, which both, not just us, the public, but the boards could have benefited from.
Asad, 2 questions for you. One, if if Pakistan came to India right now for a test series, serious question, do you think they could compete? And well, they'll compete, but do you think they could potentially win? And second question, how would you structure the series? You know, what's an innovative idea that you have to add like something to those series, which could make it like, you know, even more exciting for fans?
Firstly, I think I'm going to say something a little controversial, and I hope I'm wrong about this, but is that if India came to Pakistan for a test series, I unfortunately, really unfortunately, and I hope I'm proven wrong on this, is that I don't think we will have packed stadiums, and I don't think it will be absolute mayhem. A big reason for that is that Pakistan, the public, the country, the way everything is gone, Test cricket is just not loved and adored here anymore. I was at the last series in against Sri Lanka when they were visiting, and it was quite empty. I tell you guys, like it was way more empty than I would expect. I definitely didn't expect packed stadiums. Maybe I thought it would be 50%. I want to say it was like at 30% or something, right?
Can I just add, Asad? Yeah, the only reason for that is the security concerns. This public, they have to go through so many. You park your car somewhere really far away, then you jump in a bus, and then it takes you here. We don't have that same convenience anymore, unfortunately. So
I'd have to disagree, because at the PSL there was that exact same security issue. I've been to all PSL matches. And there's the exact same security protocol, and the stadiums were packed. Like you could not find a seat in the PSL and the T20 league. So I unfortunately would have to disagree there, Kadeem. So yeah, I'll have to take that controversial view that Test cricket is not yet, or not anymore, loved and adored in Pakistan the way it was.
Is the reason because there's a generation that has missed out on Test cricket watching growing up?
Possibly, very possible. And okay. also, like I said, the heroes and all the greatness has come from, for example, I mean, the T20, we last won we were T20 champions. That's probably the last trophy that we had, right? Yeah, you can argue Champions Trophy as well, but in the terms of World Cup,
we had the Test Maze.
Sorry,
we had the Test Maze we were number 1 for about 2 months.
yeah, but we didn't win a World Cup Test match or anything. Like there wasn't, it wasn't like widely celebrated. But when Shahid Afridi and Yunus Khan won that T20 World Cup, like that was like all over. It was like going crazy, all of that. So I think, and we've seen a lot of one days and T20s, etc. The way things are moving also, it's just a lot more excitement. More excitement is created around that. More of our heroes. I mean, people like Shahid Afridi are opting to play T20s. They're retiring from tests. Amir, like a lot of these guys are like, the heroes are also starting to play T20s. And also just another reference point, also the UAE test matches, by the way, have been fairly empty. So unfortunately, I'd have to disagree with everyone and think that if a test series happens in Pakistan, I don't think it will be as packed and as crazy. But yeah, sorry, remind me your earlier 2 questions.
Well, the earlier question was, it's a good point though. Before I kind of get to those questions again, I actually think that in India, those tests, if marketed well and they put a proper plan around organizing it and they put it in the big centers, I do think they'll be packed, because I think the Indian public, it's not as hard to go watch a match. To your point, Kalim, it's still really easy. I mean, like Wankhede Stadium in Bombay is in the heart of the city. Yes, it's not like you're watching a game at Lords. The comfort levels aren't quite there, and it can be hot. But I do think that people would go. Whether they're packed for 5 days or not, I'm not sure, but I think it'll be a lot more packed than you're saying, and it would be in Pakistan. In terms of questions, so do you think if they played a test series now, like how well would Pakistan compete?
Yeah, so look, I think the test team is in rebuilding phase. If you asked me how would the outgoing team with the likes of Yunus Khan and Misbah and Amir when he was playing, etc., and Abbas at his peak, I think that was a different ball game. I think today Pakistan's test team is in rebuilding phase. The top order needs to kind of prove itself. Babar is just kind of rising. He did really well last couple series in tests, but the top order, the openers need to prove themselves. They need more experience. The middle order, it's not taken over the reins of the Miss You era. We've got people like Haris Sohail and Asad Shafiq and a bunch of others who still haven't taken those reins over. So I think we're in the rebuilding phase. We are like where if you've seen the test, the series on the Australia team, I think we are that phase. So I don't think we can heavily compete. I'd love to be proven wrong, but that's one element is the batting. The middle order really worries me because that's always been solid for Pakistan over the years. And I think another very important piece that you alluded to earlier was the spin bowling department. Pakistan's spin bowling department has been, world class throughout these few years. And right now, it's actually, I believe it's actually struggling. None of the frontline spinners are in top form.
You don't think Shadab Khan is like a good prospect?
Not for tests, I don't think so. He needs to have sort of more variations and really have much more control. For the test game, and he's also very inexperienced in that department. Yasir was doing pretty well, but he's also gone out of form. And so I think our the spin department of the test team is going to be fall a little bit short. Pace department too. I think Abbas lately has been out of form. I haven't seen him lately, so I'm not. Lately means like very recently. I haven't seen him, so I'm not sure. Also, I think one more point that I do want to bring up, I know it's going a little bit back, is around the fast bowling and why it's deteriorated. And a couple of theories that I want to highlight. Firstly, is from whatever I speak to, even my, like for example, my club's coach, who played with a lot of the bowlers like Aqib and even Wasim, etc. He had experience in those days, is talking about their fitness and their commitments levels. Wasim Akram, for example, would run at 6 a.m. for 2 hours first and then bowl for 2 hours. Like he's famous for doing that. No Pakistani today, none of these guys, whether it's Naseem Shah or Shaheen Shah or any of these guys, like none of these guys follow that kind of a strict kind of regimen routine. So I think the fitness, the practice is definitely lacking. That's one element. Second element is is a piece we haven't spoken about yet, which is actually county cricket. So if you hear of Wasim and Waqar and some of the greats, Imran, they all talk about that they learned a lot in county cricket, and that's where they even learned to play in English conditions and things like that. So a lot of our fast bowlers, or very few of our fast bowlers, are having that similar kind of stint and that same kind of exposure that some of these greats had back then. And then I think a third point is a subtle point also, which is around having your call it role model, mentor, guider, whatever on field. So Wasim, for example, had Imran standing at mid off and speaking to him about which ball to bowl and how the batsman is reacting and all of that. That is actually invaluable to these guys. Shoaib had that with Wasim. Right now, I mean, a 16-year-old guy in Australia, who does he have? He has maybe Wahab, but is Wahab a great? Is he like fantastic? I mean, the Shaheen Shah Afridi is 18. Like, what is that? 18-year-old guy gonna guide a 16-year-old? It's like, I don't want to give the example of the blind leading the blind, but we don't have that like legend standing on field and guiding ball by ball. So there are a few of these points.
That's a phenomenal point actually, because I do think the influence that Imran Khan had on building Wasim and Waqar up, even Aqib Javed, that can't be ignored. In fact, that was, maybe the Indian equivalent to that was the inspiration that Sachin has given to people like Virat Kohli, Kohli being on the field with Sachin in his early days, even during the World Cup in 2011, which we won. I think there's immense sort of respect for such people. And when you step on the field with someone like that and you're trying to become someone like that, I think there's an innate sort of commitment you have as an athlete, which forces you to continue to be better. And I think that's a really good point. So Rashid, I'd like to get your thoughts on this, which is, do you think that do you really think, kind of being very blunt, that India is missing out on playing Pakistan in Test cricket right now? Or do you think the BCCI and, the watching public, quite frankly, don't care and are happy to play them every 4 years in a World Cup?
No, I think kind of the cricket connoisseur, the guys who love the game and like Test cricket included, and I think kind of we still have loads of them in India. Those guys are definitely missing out. Of course, kind of with the IPL and with kind of the level of cricket that the Indian team is playing, like there's no dearth of cricket. We're playing the best countries at the best venues, and all of that. I think kind of even in India, I think kind of with the growth of the game, it's not just the traditional centers of cricket that are actually finding and unearthing the players. Going back 20 years or so, it was like basically just the main cricket centers where you'd find the talent.
Right.
But now it's coming out of everywhere. But I do think, like, as a cricket lover, like not being able to play, and watch a potentially great rivalry I mean, not just us, but like, just the general cricket watching public across the globe is missing out. And, the more that can be done to kind of get that back, the better.
I'm curious, actually, if we flip the sort of, the questions and answers a bit. Do you guys have questions for us in terms of how the cricketing culture differs, Asad and Kalam? Like we can maybe kind of answer what you guys would like to know about, Indian cricketing culture and how it differs.
Yeah, I think I'd love to just ask that, what happened in the last call it decade, where like I mentioned before, my view is that a lot more exposure came in, a lot more money poured in. But I would love to hear from you guys, like what happened that took the Indian team from call it good to great, because I just don't have a better phrase. But what made that happen? That India went from being a good competing team to now being a great team and amongst the top 2-3 in the world across formats.
So I'll tell you my take, which is I think the IPL has actually driven a lot of that. And I actually think if you look at it format by format, in Test cricket, we can come to in a little bit because I'm not 100% convinced on the argument being either way. But in one days and T20s, the reason why the Indian team is so much better is because the exposure that they've gotten to international players at the IPL, watching them train, seeing how well they eat. Nutrition's become a huge thing, especially with Virat Kohli and being the captain and the trendsetter. Seeing how the commitment to playing cricket. I remember Greg Chappell, I actually spoke to him, and he had said that, sorry, no, not Greg Chappell. Dennis Lilliet, I'd spoken to him at a tournament here in Philadelphia. And I asked him, you ran the MRF Pace Academy in Chennai for so many years, like decades. Why were we not producing fast bowlers, in the 90s and 2000s? Maybe Srinath was one, Zahir Khan was another, but, odd people out, not like how you guys did. And he said something, I'll never forget this. He said, there was no one who would put the effort in that academy. If you ask them to go and run in that heat in Chennai, which is no doubt brutal, but if you ask them to go run, they'd say, oh, one person would come back and say, sorry, sir, my foot is hurting or my leg's hurting or this, that. And it's like, okay, fast bowlers do have injuries and stuff, no doubt, but it was not that. It was more like a consistent lack of effort. And I think with the IPL coming in, there's nowhere to hide, because if you want to get paid and you want to be in those teams, it's now no longer a selection committee. It is actually a team that has a monetary interest in this league. And so their motivations are driven by doing well. And if your motivations are driven by doing well, kind of like how it's structured in American sports, you will pick the best and the guys who've got the least excuses. So that's kind of my approach, my sort of answer as to why, the around the edges, the Indian teams become a lot more consistent, a lot more professional. And I think in one day in T20 cricket, it's sort of very obviously seen. I have a different answer for Test cricket, but before I talk too long, I'd like Rashid and Vedant to give their views.
I mean, I think my view is, I think we've been in the last about maybe 15, 20 years, we've been blessed with great leaders. So I think, from the Gangulis, from the Dravids, and now kind of Kohli, they've really owned the team and they own the culture. And I think especially with Ganguly, who was a great backer of people, and Kohli, I think, has really taken it upon himself to drive a culture change. I think driving a culture change it's a harder thing to do. And I think you need a strong leader to really inculcate that culture, that change in mindset, the focus on fielding, the additional professionalism. And when it kind of comes from the top, it then kind of very quickly, it's very easy to kind of, seep down. It's not just the Indian team that kind of has this culture and mindset. It's gone down into the first class cricket, into the club cricket, kind of through the board. And I think kind of that's kind of really kind of helped, take Indian cricket forward. Those, really kind of, kind of almost lit a kind of booster under where kind of Indian cricket could go.
Vedang, do you think, to Rashid's comment, prior to Ganguly, you had someone like a Sachin Tendulkar as captain. Do you think that he, Sachin didn't really set the trend, and perhaps, what's your take on why the Indian team's really become?
He's a terrible captain.
So as Kalim had mentioned previously on this chat, that great players sometimes don't make great coaches. So I would just take a cue from him and say that great players sometimes don't even make great captains. So I feel that Sachin he was too micro as a captain, and I think he used to, he felt everyone was as talented as him, so he could push people, and because of that he didn't get the results. And I feel Indians, I mean, what Rashid said in terms of leadership, I do agree, because Indians were very, very docile people before Ganguly, and I think after Ganguly, we started winning abroad, we started getting the confidence. I mean, I don't know if you all remember this in the '99 Australia tour. Srinath hit Ponting on his head, and Srinath went and tried to apologize to Ponting, and Ponting just like shoot him away, like, go back to your mark, I'll handle myself, kind of a thing. So, that aggression wasn't there. And I feel that, our leadership was definitely, required, which Ganguly filled in quite well. And I would take your point also, Nikhil, of what you said about the IPL. I mean, that has created a lot of exposure to India. And the other thing which I feel, I mean, this is a little bit of a pessimistic remark, but I feel the quality of cricket, if you compare it to the 90s, I mean, has gone down a little bit, especially where the bowling is concerned. Because today, if you compare the bowling of the 90s, you had Pakistan with a Wasim and Waqar. You had West Indies with Curtly, Ambrose and Courtney Walsh. You had South Africa with Donald and De Villiers and Craig Matthews and Craig McMillan. You had Australia with McGrath, Gillespie, Lee. So, actually, we should also bear in mind that I feel that this has become much more of a batting friendly game after, say, 2005 or something like that. So that also plays a little bit of a thing. I'm not trying to take out any credit from the Indian team in terms of their successes, but this also should be borne in mind that the competition between bat and ball, I feel, from 2010 to 2020 has gone down. And I feel, now a score of, say, 350, which was scored in 2003 against us in the World Cup final. I mean, that was a score which was inevitable that we were going to lose. And today, 350 is a very chaseable score. So, cricket also has changed a little bit over the years. But I also feel that Indian cricket has got a lot of fillip because of, the IPL. And I feel Pakistan, though I still feel that they have a lot of natural raw talent, even today as we speak. But just because of the political issues and just because of, certain countries not touring Pakistan, I think that's dented them to an extent. Otherwise, I still believe Pakistan has as much of talent as what they had even in the Wasim and Waqar Yunus times.
Interesting. There's one, go to Kalim right after this, but the one small point I'd like to make is there's actually a theory, which I've heard from many cricketers, even professional ones, saying that the quality of batsmanship has actually gone up. I mean, you don't see the kind of shots that AB de Villiers plays. You never saw them in the 90s. So that's kind of one also alternative theory as to, like, people think that the quality of bowling may not have gone down, but the quality of batsmanship has just kind of gone up. But anyways, Kalim, I'd like to sort of go to you and get your views on that, but also kind of what would you like to, ask us and learn from us about Indian cricketing culture?
Just to touch upon what Vedang said, obviously, I agree with you. I don't think the quality of bowling has gone down. T20 cricket has improved, the batsman's game to another level. There's, the bats that the batsmen get now, that has changed the game. Obviously, you give the same bat to Viv Richards in his prime, he will, he will tear everybody apart. whether it's Imran, Wasim, Waqar, anybody. So I think obviously that has changed, and secondly, obviously the fielding. So basically, the whole game has changed massively. Looking at T20 cricket, so I think previously, if you average 30 in, currently if you average 30 in Test cricket right now, back in the days that's like 25. And if you average 25 now, that's like averaging 20 in the previous era. In my opinion, I don't think the bowling standards have gone down. I think there are still very
I
skilled.
see what you mean. Yeah, no, that makes sense. As a bowler's average, you think, kind of 20, the best bowlers were averaging 20 in the 90s, and sort of now they're averaging 25 is what your point is.
I feel that if you bring them against the current batsmen,
I
in
see.
their, I don't think they would be as good as they were previously. I'm not taking anything away from them. This is why I don't like comparing eras, because for example, it is not a certain, like, let me give you Yunus Khan's example. I mean, there's people who say that Javed Miadad, he's nowhere near Javed Miadad. Unfortunately, it's not Yunus's fault that he was born in a different era. He's the only player in the world who has scored a century all over where Test cricket has been played. Not even like the greats like Rahul Dravid or Sachin Tendulkar, even they have not achieved that. So you can't compare eras for me. Cricket has moved on, to another level, and unfortunately the batting has gone up. The bowlers, there are still very Pat Cummins, Mitchell Stark, Josh Hazelwood. And if you compare them to playing against, let's say in early 2000s or in the 90s, I think their averages would have been far better, because you wouldn't get the AB de Villiers coming and playing these scoops and all these different shots. So I think that's one of the major reasons. And their strike rate, obviously, their averages are up because of the T20 cricket.
Right.
How many games have we seen in the last 10 years in Test cricket that have been drawn? Previously, in the previous era, it was so boring. Matches used to be drawn all the time. Now we get a result in 4 days. I mean, this is why the ICC has come up as well, saying that people want to see 4-day Test match cricket as opposed to 5. That patience is not there anymore, unfortunately, and they get on with the game. Bowlers leave more runs than they used to, which affects their averages and obviously their strike rates. So that in terms of me. My question would be in terms of the Indian fast bowling. Previously, as you mentioned, that India did not have any great fast bowlers. So how did that suddenly change? I think India has one of the best bowling attack, in the world right now. And if you obviously compare like all four of them, I mean Shrishant, for example, not sorry, Shrishant, Ishant Sharma.
Ishant Sharma.
Yeah, he from averaging almost 40, and I used to laugh that I wish I was an Indian. I would have had probably had a chance to play for India as a fast bowler. I'm not taking anything away from his pace in terms of that, but I think he was all over the place, and he was averaging in the high 30s. Now his average is below our Wahab Riaz, who we want back in Test cricket. He's averaging almost similar to let's say Muhammad Amir. So
Yep.
how is this fast bowling era? I mean, what led to that, and how has that changed? And how is India getting better fast bowlers as opposed to in the past?
Sure, Rashid, do you want to go?
Sorry.
Yeah, sure. I think kind of it's down to kind of a couple of things. I think with more money in the game, it's the understanding of actually and the smartness of people to say actually, look, this is an area where we're weak. With the competition, this is a great route through which I can actually play for the country. Obviously, kind of the middle order is kind of packed. We probably always struggled with opening batsmen for a while, but like as a batting unit was so strong, we always had great spinners, and I think there was a realization that this is probably one of the easier routes into kind of top flight cricket. I think that's kind of definitely one area. And then I think with the understanding of like the different elements of fast bowling, so it isn't just coming there and like slinging it as fast as you can. It's the action, it's the food, it's the entire professionalism. And I think the last point is the ability of the coaches more recently to allow that natural talent to come out. So someone like a Bumrah,
Yeah.
who actually has a very unique and different bowling action, and to kind of, many coaches, previously in India, I think, would have tried to change that. And I think there's definitely a realization now, more and more, that actually let them just go and do what comes to them naturally. And let's kind of try and find ways to kind of nurture that piece versus change it. And I think that's kind of allowed lots of the current crop, from Shami to the Yadavs to the Sharmas, and the Bumrahs, to actually kind of really come through the system. And of course, the IPL has helped, no doubt.
Yeah,
the IPL has helped.
I'll give you sort of tie in that point with our first topic, which is a lot of the cricket in India, especially coaching, it takes its roots from the English method of playing cricket, which is very textbook, kind of what I was explaining to you. Like, guys are taught to be cover driving machines. In fact, in the nets, they don't ask you if you're if you ask you what type of bowler you are, they'd say, are you a spinner or a medium pacer? There's no fast bowling. There was never any fast bowler. That wasn't even an option when you asked as a kid. And the medium pacers were taught to pitch the ball up on a length, because in India, it's the only way to take wickets, right, as a fast bowler. So I think there was a lot of that sort of mindset, and that needed to go. And I think, to Rashid's point, a lot of the credit goes to people who have nurtured players like Bumrah. But I also actually would like to make two separate points. Again, I sort of credit the IPL, because you have people like, Wasim Akram coming and coaching KKR. You've got, some of the best coaches in the world. Tom Moody coaches Hyderabad. These guys are sort of pros who, and they bring in big sort of support staff. So you have like a fast bowling coach, dedicated to like the 4 or 5 fast bowlers. You've got, people like, in the early days of the IPL, or even sort of later on, Brett Lee played for so long for Kings 11 Punjab. And you had a number of fast bowlers coming through there. You've had at Mumbai Indians, you've got Malinga, who has clearly had influence on Bumrah. You've got Bhuvneshwar Kumar, who's kind of, played at Hyderabad under Tom Moody. So there's a lot of sort of the effect of the IPL is multifold. It's not just the coaches, it's the guys you play with, you learn from. It's the guys you sort of get inspired by on being on the field, like you said, Asad. That's helped a lot. And the other thing which I've heard a lot of Indian players credit is Bharat Arun, who's the fast bowling coach, or the bowling coach rather. He's been credited a lot in the last 4 to 5 years as a bit of a unsung hero. I've heard that he's done wonders with the fast bowlers. They've changed their entire regimen in terms of training and fitness and nutrition. I think that's kind of changed a lot. And I think, to your question on Ishant Sharma, I have heard that has been a huge influence for him, because, to your point earlier, he was all over the place. And I think sort of they kind of sat down with him and said, look, if you want to be a good, end up as a good sort of fast bowler for India, focus on Test cricket and focus on sort of improving the, in the 1 or 2 areas which you need to improve, maybe consistency, or kind of, because he has the, the talent. He's tall, he's got reasonable pace, moves about a ball in the air. So I think kind of that mindset change was a big step change for them.
My one more point. I think Rashid and Nikhil have covered both. I think we have, as Nikhil had said, that Indians had a very cautious as well as a very textbook kind of coaching also of fast bowlers. I think there's been a full attitude change, and in terms of confidence levels, because again, as they mentioned about the IPL, I think that has fully changed the full attitude towards cricket generally in India. I mean, if you're practicing with someone like a Wasim Akram and a Brett Lee, I mean, today your confidence levels will definitely rise, and you're definitely on the right path. Whereas previously it was always that, and then because of T20, then they practice a lot of arts in terms of, your Yorkers, your slower balls, your, knuckle ball, which has come up, which is an invention which, Bhuvi just got out, I think, in the last 3 years. So, there's a lot of innovation which comes through, which, previously wasn't there. I mean, previously it was just you have to hit the right length. What is the right length? That is 3/4 of the pitch. And, if the ball is moving, then you'll get the edge and you'll go. That was what was taught. I mean, if the ball doesn't move, then you're cover driven. If the ball moves, then, it's edge to the slip and, you become a hero. So, there are a lot of different methods of how to do fast bowling. And that's what I feel. I mean, more than county cricket, because you don't see many Indians now going to county cricket. I think it was a thing of not the past, but I would say that, there are various other methods which they feel more comfortable practicing within the Indian structure itself. And I feel the biggest thing is the attitude change, which I felt Pakistan had in the 90s. That was, don't get scared of anything. Just go there, bowl fast, be aggressive, and you will get your wickets. And that is what I saw in Wasim, Waqar, Shoaib, which I feel to an extent is missing now because maybe of the confidence.
They had that killer instinct.
They had that killer instinct, that, I have to go and beat this guy up and I have to get him out, whether it be a Sachin, whether it be a, this thing. And Indians were scared. I mean, I'm being quite open, like 20 years back, whatever anyone would say, at least I feel that Indians were scared of this, which is they have evolved over the last 20 years.
Just one more question in terms of, as you mentioned that, Indian players don't really go to county. Sometimes even the board does not allow them to play any other major league. What is the reason behind it? And do you think that has increased the value of Indian players? Because obviously every league would love to have them, but the board is not allowing it. So I mean, for Pakistan, I feel that we don't get enough cricket as it is, and we should let our players play all over the league because not many people would come to PSL. But if they go to other leagues, they can interact with these foreign players. Obviously, you guys have the IPL. Beside that, but what is the main reason behind not allowing their players to play in other leagues or county, I suppose?
So I'll tell you, like a lot of players do go and play county cricket, like Pujara and Ashwin, etc. do have stints in county cricket, even in sort of last season. I believe Ishant also went to county cricket, so that was another reason why he developed. Look, I think county is sort of allowed, but as far as why they aren't allowed to play other leagues, look, I don't actually know the specific reason. It might come to me if I think about it, but I think the general understanding is the IPL itself is a 2-month long tournament with probably a month of sort of set up and training before that. So 3 months of the year almost gone with the IPL, and then the Indian team is playing a lot of cricket year round. I mean, like they're playing everywhere around the world. And so I think the priority is to keep the Indian cricket brand as number one. Because if you suddenly have people like Kohli or Bumrah or whatever going and playing in different leagues, I think it kind of dilutes the quality of the Indian brand. And I'm actually a supporter of it because I personally feel that international cricket should remain, as the primary sort of top flight cricket in the world. But that's just my take. I mean, maybe the other guys have a different view on it.
Yeah, no,
the other thing also, just to continue from where Nikhil left. I mean, I definitely feel that international cricket should be given topmost priority. And if you see, a lot of English cricketers also don't participate that much in IPL. That's because that coincides a lot with their home season. I mean, they might play half of the IPL and then they would have to ship back to England. Is like the biggest example was Bairstow last season. I think Bairstow and I think Ian Morgan, if I'm not mistaken, I think they had to leave Hyderabad last season because they had a home series in England. So boards do prefer, and similarly with Indian boards, that they do prefer that international cricket is given maximum importance.
Which I understand, of course.
Yeah,
countries. Yeah, sorry, Rishi.
No, I was saying I have a slightly different point of view, actually. I mean, I agree that international cricket has to take first priority. That goes without saying. So if you have a contract in the IPL or BBL or PSL and you have an international game, that takes priority. It goes without saying. But I think one of the reasons why the BCCI hasn't allowed Indian cricketers to actually play in the BBL, for example, is because the value of that BBL will almost rival the IPL. And I think they want to keep the IPL as the marquee cricket tournament. And obviously, if you have a Kohli or earlier Sehwag, all these huge names. And if you have a Kohli playing for, I don't know, the Perth Scorchers, my God, the following and the fan base and the value of that tournament will go through the roof.
But ironically, the best Aussie players don't play in the BBL either.
No, most of them do.
They don't actually, because that coincides with their home season. So David Warner and Smith and stuff aren't really playing the BBL either.
It goes without saying that your playing for the country has to take priority over club. But I do
understand that. But for example, my question would be somebody like, let's say, Harbhajan Singh. He's still an active cricketer. He's playing, IPL. Why is he not allowed to play? Let's say
crazy. It's restriction of trade, if you ask me. I mean, I am surprised someone hasn't sued the BCCI for restriction of trade, because as a cricketer, I only have probably at best 20, 25 years of my earning life. Up to about 40, if you're super fit, can you kind of actually be playing? And if the BCCI and like Harbhajan's a great point, like he's not going to play for India again.
Well, he said he wants to make a comeback to the World T20.
No, but even someone like Yuvraj, who's retired, had to take special permission, and they made
for the Canadian
or Suresh Raina, big names in T20 cricket.
I mean, honestly, someone should get out there and sue the BCCI for restriction of trade, because I think what they're doing is completely unfair.
So the last questions from you guys before we have like one more tiny section at the end.
I will leave it to Asad.
Asad.
Just very quickly, guys, I know we're running out of time. Just a quick 1 minute as to the role of the BCCI and generally the top three. Like, what's your view as to, why is that the top three are also the greatest teams right now? Like, just what is the connection? Is there any connection, between being part of the elite three and then being the top performers right now?
And one more point, is it fair to have the top three, dominated by the top three, obviously ICC manipulating decisions? Is that fair on the rest of the world?
I mean, I think more needs to be done to make cricket a genuinely global sport. And to say the International Cricket Council is run by basically, three, and money talks, right? That's the bottom line, money talks, and it's not just in cricket, it talks in every sport and most walks of life. So I get that. But I think it's what you do with the power and the money that's important. So, in any organization, you are going to have, some people who sit at the top of the table. But it's really important to for those people to understand the responsibility they have to the wider game and not have that narrow view. And I would hope that that's more is done to spread the game globally. And make it a genuinely global game, and more is done even within the top 10 test playing nations to genuinely make it more democratic. But I'm not averse.
I have a tip. Sorry, Rashid, go on.
No, go on. I'm done.
So I think the top three, as you mentioned, Asad, happened because of, I think there is a little bit of a divide as of now in present day cricket between the top three and the other 6 or 7 teams which are there in terms of performance. So because of that, the top three has happened, and because it is the most popular sport in India. I mean, it's and it got aggravated with the IPL also. But I totally agree with Rashid's point. I mean, the ICC's main objective should be that today you see football. I mean, it's literally there rampant in every country in the world. But, you see cricket is restricted only to 10. So I think the main objective of the ICC should be to globalize the sport rather than, see where the money is. I know it's easier said than done. And again, I agree with Rashid in terms of, that money is the most important thing, whether we like it or not. But the top three concept, I think, has come out involuntarily just because I feel presently there's a huge gap between the top three and the bottom 6 in terms of performance, because you see a West Indies, you see a Sri Lanka, and now you even see a South Africa. I mean, the way those 3 teams have plummeted over a period of time, I think it is quite substantial. So, I think involuntarily, unfortunately, this has happened. But I mean, I would want still that cricket and ICC's main object should be globalizing the sport rather than politicizing it.
Yeah, I mean, my take is the top three. If you look at it, they're also the best performing economies versus the other teams, right? I mean, look at South Africa's economy is completely falling apart. You guys are better versed with it, but Pakistan's economy has not been doing well for years. Australia and England have very stable economies, perhaps not growing that fast, but India has grown a lot in the last 20 years, and I think part of that has brought in so much money into the game. The IPL, it is another example of that. The consumer spending power. So you and I talked about this, as with regards to startups, right? I mean, that the whole startup culture in India has gone, berserk, and there's so much money coming into new tech startups. And I think cricket is sort of being the biggest passion. Just there's a lot of money in cricket, and as a result, it's also a very sort of lucrative career for a lot of people. Ranji Trophy cricketers actually get paid reasonably well. IPL cricketers get paid really well, and then Indian cricketers get paid phenomenally well. I think Australia and England have similar sort of structures as well. I don't think that's the case in most other parts of the world. For many other reasons, I think India took its opportunity, and I think other places, for example, let's say West Indies, did not. I mean, they had phenomenal. Asad, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, I think sort of West Indies, for example, did not. When I'd interviewed Brian Lara, and he told me the facilities that they had in the West Indies were just back in like they're still stuck in the 50s, whereas India's actually invested a lot. Now, clearly the BCCI could be doing way more, but at least they've done the basic amount, to try and grow the game in the country at a grassroots level. I think they've kind of done a bad job in maintaining the primacy of Test cricket, and they don't market the games well enough, but they've done really well with the IPL. So I think on the flip side, I think you think Pakistan, you guys will know better than me, but whenever I speak to you, kind of tell me, and we spoke about earlier today, which is there's not enough investment in the game. There's just not, you're not driving perhaps the best talent to playing the game. And so I think, as far as why those top three tend to be the best in the world, I just think resources, talent, investment, put all that stuff together, and that's kind of the reason why those three teams tend to perform
Is it
better.
fair for top three teams, big three, to actually control ICC? Manipulate their decision, especially, for example, like India. So sorry, this may sound controversial, but bullying the rest of the boards in terms of making decisions. Obviously, they have the power, they have the money. There is no denying in that, as we spoke. So, is it fair to actually, control the ICC in that aspect?
So look, I think without knowing the intricacies of all the stuff involved there, hard for me to comment entirely on what is fair or not. But I'll give you a bit of history. Up until the early 90s, Australia and England had a veto on the ICC. So basically, no decision could go forward without Australia or England's, approval. Not saying that's right, but that's kind of a bit of historical context. The other thing, which I think is sort of is a debatable thing, is India actually gets a less percentage of its share versus the amount of money that it brings into cricket. So that's to be sort of, I don't really have a major view on it, but I think that's another thing, right? I mean, if you were a shareholder of a company and let's say you owned 80% of the shares, but you were only getting 60% of it back, you probably would be upset as well. I think that's a bit of context, but I agree with the other guys. I mean, I think generally speaking, cricket, the job of the ICC should not be to only cater to the top three or to even the top 10. It should be to cater to growing the global game. And
Global sport.
and as far as like decisions being manipulated and stuff, again, hard for me to say, but it's sort of like if it is happening, obviously it's not in the best interest of the game, and I think we need to continue to grow the game globally, so it becomes sort of more of a international sport, unlike it being where it is today, really just like a sport played by 10 countries.
Yeah, and I think if I can just have one comment here, just quickly, is on just seconding what sort of Rashid and Vedant were mentioning, was just around globalization of the sport. And I don't know enough, but I would love to see more, call it appropriation or more capital flowing from the ICC to the lesser kind of call it the developing countries. Maybe a certain percentage goes to the countries even like which are starved for resources like Pakistan, and I'm sure others like possibly South Africa and Sri Lanka, etc. as well, Bangladesh, I'm sure, but also the other developing nations, right? I mean, we've seen some really good talent come out of like, Ireland has shown promise, Afghanistan has shown amazing promise, etc. So I would love to see that more from the ICC coming, like actual development of funds, because to me right now it's a pretty opaque organization with this kind of almost big daddy decision making. So that's just something that I would love to see for the development of the game.
Yeah, just one final question in terms of from all of you really. What's your take on like globalizing the game? What's your take on ICC's decision to limiting it to the top, the World Cup, limiting the World Cup to the top teams, rather than letting Holland play? Just let anybody with an international team to come forward, just like we do in FIFA.
I actually think the T20 World Cup is a good forum for that, but I fully support the decision to only have 10 teams in the one-day World Cup. I thought it was a much better tournament. There were no meaningless games. It was probably one of the better World Cups I've seen after a long time. So I'm fully for it. That's my sort of 10-second take.
I fully agree with Nikhil. I think the World Cup is your marquee tournament. And I remember World Cups where we would have Kenya and Canada and all these countries, and it was a joke. I'm all for supporting games, supporting cricket, building at the grassroots level, investments, coaching, all of that. But to get a country that's not in the same ballpark to play a World Cup, it just demeans the World Cup itself. So like with FIFA, you got to qualify for the World Cup. The top 10 teams is good. It was a great World Cup, great format. I think we should probably stick with it. But at the same time, do a hell of a lot more to promote the game.
Just I totally agree with Nikhil and Rashid on this. Just to pick up on Nikhil's point that to put the teams on the T20 World Cup, I think that's a very, very good idea, because T20 is something which a less talented side also can pull off, because it's for a shorter period of time. So you won't have those irrelevant games like today. You're not going to go and see not Afghanistan, but say a UAE versus Muscat game for a 50-over game, because it's going to be 7 hours or 8 hours. So you might not see it as a neutral supporter, but the same thing which if that's a T20 game, people might get pulled into it. So I totally agree with this that I'm all for globalizing the game, but encourage teams through the T20 route, and then slowly develop them by bringing them into the 50 overs and then to the Test cricket. I mean, otherwise to just push them into 50 overs, I think it is just an insult to the World Cup, I would say. So I totally agree with Nikhil and Ritik and Raj.
So the final segment, really quick, just a couple of minutes. We kind of reminisce on games in the past, but what I'd like to do today is I'd like the Pakistani guys to pick an Indian performance that they were really awed by. It could be a specific batting performance or a specific bowling performance, and we'll do the opposite. We'll pick a Pakistani performance, which, let's say, for example, it could have been a spell by Imran Khan, for example, that we liked, or for you, it could be, a Sunny Gavaskar knock. But I'm picking, let's just say, let's go 90s and from then, start with Kalim. Pick one Indian performance that you really enjoyed in the last sort of 20 odd years.
I think obviously I was born in '92, so I can't relate too much to that era. But looking forward to 2000, I think for me, obviously, I rate Test cricket highly, and I think Sehwag 300 in Pakistan. I think that's been one of the best thing to see, and to dominate Pakistan bowlers on their home turf. I think that's probably one of the best inning that I could remember.
That was 2006, was it, or
2004?
2004.
2004, right? Okay, yeah. Asad?
What's really funny is that is probably my greatest moment also.
Now you got to pick a different one, though. You'll have to pick a different one now.
Let me make a point, though, and to why I think that's great. And okay, I'll use great as a controversial term. I'm actually in awe of Sehwag as a player in general. Just because growing up, to a certain degree, I was one of those exceptional kind of people here who was like coached, and I went through a lot of coaching routes and stuff like that. So, we were always taught to use your feet and things like that, right? Sehwag, I always growing up called that guy super glue. My word for him was super glue. And I never thought that this guy's going to make it far in international cricket because the guy's feet does not move. He just stands and hits and delivers. And, whichever cricketer, commentator, coach, anybody you speak to, it's like, move your feet, get to the ball, this, that. The guy just simply stands and hits the ball here and there and does an edge and this and that. So, I mean, for him to score 300 was just like, wow, I was in awe. But I'll come to my second point, which I think for me was huge, was the Kohli chase. I think that the Kohli chase for that World Cup and the way he did it, was just something phenomenal. Because, and again, I'm a bit in awe of that just because of maybe I reminisce also, and it's wishful thinking because I don't think any Pakistani player really has the art of the chase the way Kohli does, and I think just that temperament, forget the skill, Sachin, Kohli, these guys, we all know they're amongst the greatest to have, stepped foot on a cricket world. But I think it's the mental kind of strength and the ability to learn the art of the chase, time the batting, and really use your brain to, win games. I think so. That's why that particular chase for me.
So I'll go with mine. It's a lesser talked about one, but to the point of having that killer instinct. I remember watching a match once where it was in Sharjah. It was actually Pakistan versus Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka was about 185 for one, if I'm not wrong, chasing 199, and all of a sudden, Wasim Akram just got a kick up the ass, and he told. He was basically coaching Abdul Razak every single ball on how to bowl, and the guy was swinging it a mile. And the comeback from there, for just to watch that, was unbelievable to watch as a cricketing fan. I mean, Pakistan tied that match. Like 15 runs, or 15 or 20 runs for 9 wickets, and it was just unbelievable. Like swing bowling in Sharjah, conditions aren't great for like bowling in general. The fire that they bowled with, I'd say we were in awe of, because we didn't have that in the Indian team those days.
But what about against India? Pakistan against India?
Against India, I actually used to be a huge fan of Saqlain Mushtaq because I thought he was a really talented bowler. I mean, for me, some of his bowling in that 99 series, particularly in the first test, was very clever. And I think the way they got Sachin out, when he was 136 or whatever, in Chennai, the planning between Saqlain and Wasim Akram, in my opinion, was very clever. And I'm always a big fan of captaincy. So I'd say that is one thing that stood out in my mind always.
For me, I'll go with two. One is a non-India moment, which is the two Wasim Akram balls at the 92 World Cup final to bowl Alan Lamb and Chris Lewis. Just the look on Alan Lamb's face, and then like when Chris Lewis comes in, that beautiful, the action and the beautiful swing to get him bowled. It's definitely it's still so fresh in my mind actually. And the other one, again, to kind of stick with the theme of two, would be the two delivery Shoaib Akhtar bowled in the Eden Gardens Test match actually to dismiss Dravid and Sachin. Again, kind of beautiful balls, great pace, and just the last one. It's just the one ball. Guys who are watching should YouTube this. When Shoaib was bowling to Watson in Australia. And it was one of the best bouncers that kind of, if it had hit Watson, he would be no more. But it literally went past his grill and well over Rashid Latif's head.
He repeated that. Yeah, he repeated that in All Stars against Jack Callis in USA when they played.
So, I mean, that was that ball. I mean, it's just to see that ball go one bounce and hit the boundary, at a huge Australian ground, is I would not want to be a batsman facing the next one.
Well, mine would be, I think, by far, because he was one of the best, one of my favorite batsmen, Saeed Anwar's 194 versus India in Chennai. I mean, for a person coming to India at that time, I think it was the highest score ever scored by an individual.
He stood for years.
Yeah. So I mean, and he was at the time one of the most talented batsmen, because I have not seen a Zahir Abbas, I have not seen Sunny Gavaskar or anyone previous to him. So before Sachin, I think he was my favorite batsman, and I've seen that innings a lot of times because it keeps coming on the TV. It used to, not now anymore. So the drive and the effort, like, what Asad was saying about Sehwag, I think that effortless, talent which Saeed Anwar had, I mean, was fantastic. I mean, if y'all unfortunately for Pakistan did not win that match, but Pakistan had almost a 115-run partnership for India-Pakistan in the 96 World Cup, or a 100-run partnership. And Saeed was the first one to get out in that.
Yeah.
But if you would have for another, I would say for another 30, 40 runs, I think you all would have won that match also easily. I mean, I was there in the stadium, so I know that, there was a lot of pressure. And I think Indians mostly had given up, till the wickets started falling.
You're
so Saeed Anwar for me, pardon?
He got caught at mid-on of
He
Srinath.
got caught where, just like I was sitting in the stand right behind that. And I think he was like, how Asad said for Sehwag. I mean, I was a big, big fan of Saeed Anwar. Unfortunately, heard about his daughter and all of that. So, his career got a little, truncated. But fantastic moment for me, at least, where Saeed Anwar was
He used to
concerned.
dominate Kumble, I remember.
Yeah, yes.
One of the few people who could.
He was one of the talented batsmen that underachieved, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Right.
Fantastic, guys. Well, look, it's all we have time for today, but great discussion. Hopefully we get to see, I think the conclusion is we need to see more India-Pakistan cricket, perhaps a test series, straight after COVID is behind us. So, but thanks a lot, guys. Thanks a lot, Asad. Thanks a lot, Kalim, for joining us. And of course, Rashid and Vedang, we
Thank you
will
so much.
continue the discussion next time.
Thank you. Thank you
guys.
so much, guys. Thanks so much.